We'll fill this in a minute.
Yeah, I'm gonna after tonight. I was just waiting till tonight, and then I'm gonna send out my thing and just get my show people lined up, for the guests and stuff. And
yes. Now, well, I'll talk to you about this later, but I was going to ask you about that third Friday, if you wanted that last Friday or not. It's I meant to ask you the other day when I was seeing you, but then I got preoccupied with something else. Because I got you on the second and third Fridays right now, and Chris is on the first Friday. Yeah,
that'd be good. I mean, unless
No, you can have it. Well, I got another show. I got a couple of shows coming on, but if you're comfortable with the slot, you can have it. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to ask you before I gave it to anybody else because you're already there.
Okay, yeah. And it's just an hour. It's still an hour, right?
It's an hour. Now, later on, if you feel more comfortable, we'll talk about that too. Because Stephanie and Chris used to do an hour, and of course they do 2 now. But
I was doing 2. Well, I was usually doing an hour and a half on.
Well, get comfortable. I mean, we're not, and we can even go up to our house. But we're comfortable right now, and it's a good slot. It's Friday night. It's evening Friday night. See, like yesterday, it's a shame because I wish I would have had you on yesterday because Karen came in. They were around 200,000 when she wrapped up. Treese left last night with 722,000 people.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So you would have had that automatic audience as soon as you came in.
And that would be nice.
Of course, I was being asked last night, so that's probably why. And I know everybody's listening to us out there in the real world. I'm getting ready to turn y'all over to Jeffrey here in a minute when he comes in, and we actually
I'm here.
And we actually start up the archiver. Actually, the archiver's on. Jeffrey, I'm going to get out of here, man, so just do you a 1002, 1003. We'll start it from there, and we'll just clip and clean the front of it off so they don't have to hear all of this. Guys, had a great time tonight, everybody. Jeffrey, if you need me, I'll be right here. Hit me up with an IM. I'm out here. As soon as I hang up, do a 1003. You're live, man.
Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show, everybody. It's Jeffrey Pritchett. And Erica Getch is co-hosting tonight on the Church
everybody.
of Mabus.
I just put it on Jeffrey here. How you guys doing?
All right, I'm back.
All right, and our guest tonight is Michael Tellinger. We're going to be discussing his book, Slave Species of the Gods, The Secret History of the Anunnaki and Their Mission on Earth. And basically, it's been a long week. I'm running on fumes, but show must go on. That's how I rock and roll. That's right. Who is next week? Oh, Chris Carter on the Afterlife, and Beelzebub will be co-hosting with me. So next week's show, November 3rd, is about the Afterlife and his book. We'll be discussing a book on the Afterlife. Well, let's go ahead and get straight to Michael. How are you, Michael?
Excellent. Lovely to be hearing your voice finally, Jeffrey.
Yes, it's definitely, I've heard your voice before on some other shows and on your YouTube videos, but yeah, definitely first time you get to hear my sexy voice.
Hi, Michael. It's Erica. I just want to say hi, and I love your videos. I was just watching them last night. I love your YouTube channel. It's awesome.
Oh, well, thank you, Erica. Lovely to hear your voice as well.
And, well, I guess, Michael, first off, let's get into some background of how you got involved with the Anunnaki story and the origins of that inspired your book, Slave Species of the Gods.
That goes back to probably when I was about 5 years old. I think most people that are involved in this field of work and research and expose probably have a past life experience in this somehow, are somehow connected through a previous lifetime or soul connection to this work. And this is becoming more and more clear to me as the days and the months go by. If you'd asked me this question 4 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been that confident about the answer that I'm just giving you now. But a number of things that have happened, specifically in the last year, have very clearly pointed to that this is not just a journey that I've chosen, but it was actually laid out for me. But my personal fascination with extraterrestrials and off-world beings and other intelligence goes back to when I was very, very young, and slowly but surely evolved through my teenage years, and eventually discovering Eric von Däniken and realizing that there were many people that were interested in the subject matter, and that it was not a taboo subject as many and the education system would make us believe. And here we are. In 2004, 2005, I felt quite frustrated with the literature that I was finding in the bookstores, and after having done all this reading all my life and fascination, and I set out to write a book that sort of pulled together a lot of the different aspects that I was interested in, specifically connecting the physical and the physiology together, and possibly presented differently. It seems to have worked, because Slave Species of the Gods has now been released by Bear & Co. Inner Traditions in Vermont, and they're going to be following up with some of my other books. So yeah, that's how it's led me to this place. But what I didn't expect, I must be very honest, when I was writing Slave Species of the Gods, I didn't expect to find the physical evidence for what Sitchin, mostly Sitchin, I suppose, has put out there in his many books about the Anunnaki, their activity, their gold mining, their giant empire, gold mining empire in a place called the Abzu. I never believed or imagined that I would be the one to expose the physical evidence of that, and that's pretty much what's happened.
All right. Michael, what is some of the physical evidence that you've uncovered, if you could tell us that?
Well, we're talking about a vast, vanished civilization that left behind a huge number of stone ruins, stone cities and settlements, very clearly connected together, very clearly connected to gold mining, clearly connected to knowledge of advanced technology and using the laws of nature for generating energy and for the use in their gold mining and mining other minerals as well. Obviously, it wouldn't have just been gold, and tools and artifacts that can be dated to extreme ages. And we can get into the dating process a bit later if you want to, but the tools and artifacts that I've started collecting that were completely ignored by archaeologists and anthropologists and researchers before I got involved in 2007. And then also being able to link the many so-called great civilizations from the north. And we're talking about the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Romans, the Sumerians, and even the Incas. Just last week, I made a huge discovery that there's a direct connection between the gold mining operations in South Africa, just like I've mentioned all the other ancient civilizations, the so-called great civilizations. We can trace all their origins to South Africa. And last week, I got confirmation that we can also trace the Incas to South Africa. When I was told about tunnels that were discovered in the early 70s, between 1971 and 75, tunnels that were paved and giant statues of Viracocha that would have, or an entity or being that looks very similar to Viracocha, that were found in these underground tunnels.
All right, Erica, you got your questions ready?
Okay, well, I was just I'm just so excited about this whole entire topic when you talk about everything. And like I say, I love your YouTube page because I want everybody to know that if you guys are listening and, you know, you want to, I mean, it's so cool to see when you're taking people on, on one of the tours of, it's called, Adam's Calendar, and it's awesome to see the entire. I mean, I kind of felt like I was there, you know, in a way. And of course, I have to say, Africa's really beautiful right there. I mean, not saying I didn't think it was before, but you know what I mean? It's such a fresh, I feel the freshness. I can see how inspiring and everything. I wish I could, like, go there on a vacation or something that, you know, after seeing your videos, it gave me something at least to, you know, like, it was kind of like that filler right now until, well, maybe I can someday, you know. But you said that people, what was it, that it's not being as studied as much. Do you find that since everything has, as the time goes by, are you finding that there's more, you know, you're bringing more awareness to this entire place and this whole subject matter with everything? Do you find that it's actually starting to get even more talked about and more, you know, more studies being done ever since, or is it still being stifled, kind of like?
Well, this is the big shocking thing, I suppose, that in the 5 years that I've been involved here, after I was introduced to it by Johann Heine in 2007, and then Johann and I spent the next 2 years working very closely together. He shared all his knowledge with me, and then I started going on in my own direction and making certain new discoveries and conclusions, and I'm pretty much on my own at the moment. At this stage, I'm the only person that I know of doing any kind of serious research or study into the stone circles of southern Africa. And just to quantify this for your listeners, there are more than 10 million of these stone structures. And that's the big shock to the system, because this is something that nobody, unless you read my books or follow my work, nobody will be aware of. And this is the hidden mystery and the vanished mystery of the vanished civilizations that needs to be taken very, very seriously. It's like discovering Egypt at the southern tip of Africa and ignoring it. So I'm the only person that's really doing anything about it. And I'm working on a new book now, and a follow-up book, because there's so much more information that I need to get out there. But at the same time, I'm entangled in the actions against the banks and the financial and the legal systems here in South Africa, so that's distracting my attention a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to say that, Michael, that I did post, and I posted to Jeff, and, like, we're aware of that situation of that video that you had, and I'm sure, Jeff, you were probably going to say the same thing. If you're, you know, I'm interested in knowing any more about that. If you are interested in, you know, if you want to talk about that at all, that situation.
Well, you know, I must tell you that it's all connected. People, I was doing, on my last tour of the USA, you know, I've done 3 consecutive tours of the USA, starting in 2010, 11, and earlier this year in 2012. And they've been extensive tours where I've done like 26 cities in one go, you know, and sharing this information because I felt it was important. But on my last tour in July this year, in Vermont, where we started out, I did my presentation, and then towards the end, I start talking about what is it that we can take out from understanding the vanished and the ancient civilizations. What can we learn from this? Because if we don't actually learn something from this, then it's absolutely useless. We might as well stop doing the research and stop doing the work if we're going to, you know, not take something out of this. I think it's really crucial that people understand that approach. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. And what I believe we need to take out of it is to understand the sequence of events that led to us being here at this point in time. What caused us as the human race and the Homo sapiens, in the form and shape we're in, confused, suffering from amnesia as a species about who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, following the chain and the thread from southern Africa of what is now very clearly our point of origin in this form as a species. What has brought us to this point? And when you start looking at that thread and that road and that chain of events, it becomes very clear that this thing called money was very specifically introduced to the human race at one specific point in our history. And then at that moment you realize that money and the financial economic structures that are crippling the world and every human being in the world today were consciously and maliciously introduced as a tool of control over the human race. And this is why I got involved in the actions against the banks and exposing the banksters for who they really are and the royal bloodlines that can be traced back for thousands of years. So for people that attack me in my presentations to say, at the end of my presentation, when I start going into what I call contributionism, a new social structure that works without money, and people think, wow, why are you getting all political on us? You know, we came here to listen to, you know, vanished civilizations and origins of humankind, and now suddenly you're getting all political on us. No, I'm not getting political on anyone. I'm just joining the dots. And if you can't join the dots, you're in big trouble, my friend.
Yeah, I love your contributionism. I saw that, and I was going to ask you, I even have this like, well, I know you're in Africa, but we could probably use a little bit of that. You need to come over and teach a few people in the White House a little bit of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're talking about the real discovery about the money system and you know, just like getting down to the nitty gritty. Because I just think this makes, like you said, we're all one, and everything that you talk about has to do with everything. It's all in a circle, and to find out who we are in humanity and who we are individually, we have to know where we've been and what is going on. And if there's something that's so important as the Adam's calendar, there's no way in hell I can see how anybody in their right mind would want to just let that go and not even be. I mean, I'm surprised you don't have so much people knocking down your door wanting to help you, because this is just major stuff to me. I'm shocked.
No, nobody is helping us, and this is you know, I might as well take this opportunity to reach out to your listeners to say, if you've got a couple of bucks spare every month, you know, go onto our website, especially onto the Ubuntu, the contributionism website, the Ubuntu Party website, because it's now become a registered political party in South Africa, the Ubuntu Liberation Movement and political party, which is based on the fundamentals of contributionism, where money doesn't exist and people contribute their talents and skills to the greater benefit of everyone in the community. It's a very simple system, and this is how it worked for thousands and thousands of years until they realized that, you know, they need to create some new form of control because people are getting a bit too smart, rising in consciousness and so forth. But if people have a few extra bucks, please help us, because at the moment I'm pretty much carrying this on my own, and it's not going to last for very much longer if that's the case.
Do you take, you know, is PayPal available? Is that any? I mean, what kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
people can go on to ubuntuparty.org.za and just make a small donation. It really goes a long way to keeping us alive and helping us print pamphlets and for me to go around and spread the message and do meetings and so forth, because all of that costs money, and this is how sick the system is. We're promoting a system that works without money, and yet we need money to keep it going. It is a strange set of events, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, it's Jeffrey here. I also write for the Examiner, so sometime I should let you answer some questions about your organization to get the word out, because I interview a lot of big people on Examiner, like Alex Gray, the artist, Charlene Harris, who inspired HBO's True Blood, so it'd be a good means for you to get some networking done. So I'll have to talk to you about that on another day. But one thing that got me caught up in Africa recently, I don't know if you're familiar with Sam Childers and that movie with Gerard Butler, the machine gun preacher. I saw that recently, and basically Gerard Butler is the guy that was in 300, the actor, but he plays it's a true story, and he plays Sam Childers, who is a drug addict in America, and he comes clean, and he pretty much finds God and decides to go to Africa to help over there, and sees, you know, what's going on. I mean, with the violence and the children being killed, and he basically goes over there and starts building schools and he just gets to a point to where he, I don't know what your stance would be on this, but he gets to a point to where he picks up the gun and starts protecting the children by the gun. And this is a real guy. Like, they just had the movie come out. It's called The Machine Gun Preacher, and if you haven't seen it, I gave them a couple of bucks after seeing it, their organization, and I'm a guy that doesn't make that much money at all, but it touched me that much. I had tears running from my eyes. But he basically went over there and started building the schools and stuff like that, and then, these armies over there killing these kids, recruiting them for, soldiers, giving them guns, and he's protecting them. He basically fought fire with fire, which I don't know if that's the best spiritual way to go, but I kind of admired it in the movie. If you ever get a chance, as Machine Gun Preacher, it's excellent. It's a tearjerker for sure, but it just came out like last year. But that got me kind of caught up in the African story and what's going on over there. And he also has a book out called, I believe, One Man's War. But Sam Childers is his name. But I guess, so what happened with your organization with the hold up from the thugs and the sort of kidnapping that just happened? If you could go into that a bit.
Well, our we started taking on the banks exactly 2 years ago in November 2010, and when we decided we've had enough, and my friend Scott Kundal, who since then started the New Economic Rights Alliance, a non-profit organization to help people that are being exploited by banks. And Scott, made some suggestions to me. Just write the bank some letters, ask them certain questions, and send them a notarized affidavit, and force them to answer these questions. Well, I did that, and they just immediately shut down and refused to give me answers to anything I asked them questions on. And I carried on insisting. Eventually, they foreclosed on my home loan, on my bond, and dragged me into court. So I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity, because I'm not going to sit back and let them bully me. And we started going to court, and Scott, with his own property down in KwaZulu-Natal, and myself with my property in near Johannesburg, and this dragged on for a year and a half. So we stood up and defended ourselves, not knowing how the court system works. I've never been in a court in my life. And this is the High Court, where you got advocates, not lawyers, advocates wearing these stupid black robes and bowing down to my lord who sits on a bench, and have to walk out backwards bowing to this individual called the judge, which they have to call my lord, and all these Kabbalistic rituals and games they play. That was a big shock. I mean, I laughed when I first walked into the court and realized that I was going to have to deal with this. But we learned some of the customs that you have to do and whatever, and we went in there and defended ourselves, stood up for ourselves, and were abused by the court system and the judges and laughed at and so forth. But they haven't gotten rid of us. And we just grown in numbers and grown in support. And we were writing all our documents and presenting that work to the judge in the courts against the most powerful institutions in the world and some of the highest paid lawyers that money can buy. But even though we had all our ducks in a row, our arguments were sound and solid, and even after my third appearance in defense of myself, which was an application to appeal a judgment against me, even when I presented the arguments very succinctly, almost in bullet points, the advocates of the bank admitted to every point that I raised. They admitted that they make money out of thin air. They admitted they create money out of debits and credits and bookkeeping entries. They admitted that they don't have cash, so they cannot actually loan money. So they break, the contract law just in that on its own. They admitted that they practice securitization. They admitted a whole bunch of stuff. And even in the face of that, the judge still passed a judgment against me. So it was clearly a predetermined outcome, and this has just now caused a chain reaction. And they thought they were rid of us, but that's far from the truth. We are carrying on. I now have a case of 5 counts of fraud against the bank. This is Standard Bank of South Africa, and anything with the name Standard in it, like Standard Oil, you've got to suspect that it's got the fingers of the Rockefellers in it somehow, somewhere.
Yeah.
And Standard Bank is I think it's the oldest bank in South Africa, and it's the largest bank in Africa. And it was also the bank that can be linked to all the early deals of the gold mining and the diamond mining time in South Africa at the turn of the century in 1900s, when Cecil John Rhodes arrived here on behalf of the Queen and started, colonizing and taking the rights of all the minerals and selling mineral rights to individuals on behalf of the Queen and so forth. And it's a really nasty individual that pretty much destroyed this country. And Zimbabwe, by the way, because that was then called Rhodesia after Cecil John Rhodes. And they just raped this, and they carry on raping this part of the world. Remember that most of the gold and diamonds and platinum of the world have come out of Southern Africa. South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. Every year, South Africa exports more than 250 tons of gold into the world. And that's what is on record. That's what is recognized. What we don't know is how much gold leaves this country that we don't know about. Probably an equal amount.
Right.
So it's all about gold, and this is what human history can be traced back to, and this is what my research and my discovery regarding the Anunnaki, the gold mining empire that goes back 280,000 years here in South Africa, these more than 10 million stone structures that can be linked to gold mining and using sound as a source of energy. All of this is connected to gold, always gold. You cannot separate human history from our obsession with gold, and that's the incredible thing. Just watch the news today. Every time you switch on any news channel, gold becomes a topic of discussion within 30 minutes.
I was going to ask you, Michael, maybe I don't understand the gold mining, like how old, but I'm going to throw this out there. The place at Adam's Calendar where they were mining gold, do you think that might be dated as one of the earliest gold mining shafts or whatever they call it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Or maybe the first one, since, it's supposed to be, Anunnaki and that old. Obviously I would think that would be like the very first one is there a way to date it, though?
Yeah, well, this is, let me explain to you how I date this stuff. There are various ways that I've dated, because you can't carbon date rock, obviously. So you've got to look at other signs and indicators to try and get to a date that makes some sort of sense. Otherwise, you'll be running around in circles forever. And so I look at things like erosion, and you can start comparing erosion once you work with rock and you start getting used to working with stones and rock, and you recognize breaks and cuts and grooves on rocks as you work with them. You start becoming familiar with what it looks like after a year and after 10 years and after 100 years, after 1,000 years, when you have certain indicators that tell you that this has been lying here for about 1,000 years, and you can recognize the erosion on the cracks and the breaks in the rocks, and what it looks like after 100,000 years and so forth. Now, again, there are sets of reasons why you would believe that the stone has been lying there for that long. And these are linked to geological activities in the area. It's linked to all kinds of other events, more recent mining events during which things were moved and activated and broken and chiseled and drilled. So you can see, okay, well, this hole was drilled in 1886 or around that period into this rock, and you can see how that hole and that drill mark has eroded. So it gives you an indication of erosion and how it happens. And then I also look, for me, the most important one is this thing that's called patina growth. Now, for people that want to understand this, I suggest you go into my YouTube channel and watch one of my video clips that I actually show you what patina is. It's like this reddish-brown skin that grows over the rock. And this is the specific kind of rock that these stone circles were made of, built out of. And it rings like a bell. They've got very strong acoustic properties, and it was that discovery that allowed me to link these stone structures to the use of sound and acoustics through its cymatic representation to the generation of energy and using of sound as a source of energy. But so when you look at these stones that were used in the building of the stone circles and where they've broken and have been lying around for a while, and they get the stuff that grows on them called patina. It's a combination of its calcification and oxidization, and this patina grows extremely slowly. You know, like it grows a microscopic layer per 1,000 years. So when you've got a tool or an artifact that was clearly shaped or molded or chiseled or created for specific purposes, and you can see the patina on it is, you know, 1 millimeter or 2 or 3 millimeters thick, you start getting an idea when that item was created. Because in its original form, it would not have had any patina on it whatsoever. It would have been beautiful black color, that pitch black charcoal color that the rock is. And the patina would have only grown on it once it was deserted and left idly lying around. So we have very clear scientific indicators that give us an idea that these stone tools and artifacts that I've been collecting for my museum, and they are on display in the museum, and again, the YouTube video clips show some of the activities in my small, little, humble museum with incredible artifacts. And the patina tells us we're dealing with artifacts that are way beyond 200,000 years old. You can't be very specific, but you just know that it's extremely old.
Right, and I'm sorry to cut in. The lichen too, right? The lichen
is a very good indicator, and so that actually takes us now to Adam's calendar. Now, just to explain to people, Adam's calendar is a calendar site. It was discovered in 2003 by accident by a guy called Johann Heine, who then introduced me to all of this stuff. And Johann did the incredible original work, pioneering work of going there and measuring the site, realizing that it was aligned with the solstices and equinoxes and so forth. But what Johann and I then did is, shortly after I met him, we had the place measured by a land surveyor to give us its geophysical positioning linked to the exact northeast, southwest cardinal points. And at that point, this was in early 2008, we realized that Adam's calendar was actually offset by 3¼ degrees in relation to the current north, south, east, west positioning. And so this has got nothing to do with precessional wobble or, you know, the sun coming up at a different time and so forth. This has actually got everything to do with the fact that the true north, south, east, west, not magnetic, true north, south, east, west, is actually offset. It's no longer applicable to where it is today. And that's impossible to happen. If you ask anybody that does this kind of study, geophysicists and so forth. So what this suggests is that since Adam's calendar, so by the way, I also gave it the name Adam's calendar after Johann Heine found it. Because I needed to give it a name, because we couldn't just call it the calendar site, you know. So we realized at that stage that it was very, very old and probably linked to the origins of humankind, because South Africa is the place where humanity comes from, and not East Africa, as many people are of the opinion or the wrong conclusions. It is Southern Africa, and specifically South Africa. So I called it Adam's calendar, but and not realizing how close to the truth that would actually be later. And
right.
These are all amazing coincidences that show you that something bigger is at play here, and we're just the instruments that are you know, unraveling this game, and we're taking this information that comes to us and sharing it with the world. But the fact that Adam's calendar is offset by 3¼ degrees tells us that we must have had some sort of a crustal displacement, as Charles Hapgood would have, was telling us for many years. And because it's impossible for the true north, south, east, west to be different from where it is today. And from the work of people like Graham Hancock and others have shown us ancient maps that show us that the true north and south of the earth were pointed out to be in different places than where they are today in the past. So, and we don't know how old those maps are. We're speculating. And so it's really important to understand that there's so little that we actually know about what went on this planet in ancient times that it's truly spectacular. And we just got to keep an open mind at all times, because whatever we think was going on is probably only 1 or 2 or 3% of the truth, and the rest is being revealed to us as time goes by.
So, Michael, these beings, the Anunnaki, I mean, the whole story is they're pretty much cruising the galaxy looking for gold to protect them. There's many theories of why they were using the gold, which we can go into that. But they basically, the origin story is that they created human beings as slaves to mine the gold, right? I mean, that's what the whole point, is that why we were made, as slaves? And what kind of gives these guys the right to do that? Aren't they breaking some kind of universal karmic code, just going around spawning slaves?
Yeah. Yeah, no, Jeffrey, you're absolutely right, and this is, when you get deeper and deeper into the story, that's exactly what you described. These Anunnaki are not a benevolent group of beings. They, at the time that they did this on this planet, it seems like they've been doing this on other planets already, and they were obsessed with gold. And they seem to continue being obsessed with gold, because we don't really know what happens to the gold on planet Earth. It disappears. And I know this from speaking to the CEO of a mining company just recently, when he told me that when they deliver the gold to the Rand refinery in Johannesburg, after what happens at the Rand refinery, nobody knows what happens to the gold. It's a best-kept secret, and they're not going to reveal to anybody what happens to the gold. The mines deliver the gold there. They get paid by the South African Reserve Bank for the gold within 2 days, and that's it. The gold's gone. All right.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
When you're speaking about that, doesn't it take twice as much, if not, I don't know how much more, gold to actually powder it up and make monoatomic gold? Isn't it like you have to really use a lot of gold to get a little bit of monoatomic gold?
I'm not sure about that, to tell you the truth. I actually don't know. That's a very good question, and I think David Hudson might be a good person to ask about that. I don't think I ever got that answer out of him when he was here in South Africa at the UFO Science and Consciousness Conference. But he did an amazing presentation about his experience, and his discovery of monoatomic gold and what he calls ORMs, orbitally rearranged monoatomic structures. But just to come back to the Anunnaki and their activities here on Earth, you're quite right. They did break some sort of cosmic code, because for those people that watch Star Trek, the Trekkies out there will know about the Prime Directive, right? This is old news to anyone that's been watching television and the science fiction channels. Everybody in the universe knows that there's this code called the Prime Directive, that you may not interfere with other cultures and other species on planets when you encounter them. Leave them alone. Don't mess with them. And that's exactly what the Anunnaki did here. They interfered with the species and the beings on this planet, quite possibly completely destroying a very consciously and spiritually advanced group of beings that existed here for millions of years prior to that. And they were so benign and so non-violent and non-conflict driven that they allowed themselves to be destroyed. That's a distinct possibility. And their obsession with the gold points clearly to their obsession with physical form and immortality within the physical form. I believe this is why we always see the depictions of the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods and the Roman gods and all these ancient so-called gods who were just advanced beings. We always see them in beautiful physical form, these big, muscular kind of looking, chaps and beautiful women, with beautiful long flowing hair and beautiful breasts and all these beautiful beings. And this is how they depicted. This was their obsession. Physical beauty and eternal life in the physical form. That was also their weakness, because anyone that's done a study into this physicality and this projected reality that we find ourselves in this physical universe will know that is just a passing phase en route to higher consciousness and other realms of existence outside of the physical bodies that we are trapped in, this very thick and high density that we are trapped in, and it's just a very short period that we spend in this, at this moment, very unpleasant physical form. And the Anunnaki seem to have been doing this in other planets as well. I don't know if you picked up on this. About 2 years ago now, there was this little Polish boy, 7-year-old Polish boy, that just suddenly out of the blue started talking about past life experiences on another planet, and started recalling what happened to him on that planet, where they were invaded by a group of beings called the Anunnaki. And they were invaded, their planet was invaded, and they were used as slaves to mine gold for the Anunnaki. And it's just, and this is a 7-year-old boy that would have no knowledge of anything that Sitchin wrote about or that I've been talking about and many others. And he spewed forth the same story from another planet, and then they left there and they came to Earth. And so that's the connection to gold, and as you said, the white powder of gold. And the obsession with white powder of gold clearly is well defined now in the Bible, when Moses took the golden calf and burnt it in the fire and he turned it into white powder. What is this obsession with white powder of gold in all of human history? That is very important link to our presence on Earth as genetically cloned beings and slaves to work in the gold mines.
Yeah, and I've seen a video where, I know things can be faked out there, so I don't know exactly how, credible it is, but it looked like it was. It looked like it was in a lab setting and stuff, to where I think they had a frog and they fed it some monoatomic gold or something, or they had talked about it levitating somehow, it's something now, or disappearing, and I'm not really sure, I don't believe everything I hear, but it does, make you kind of wonder what properties, like you said in the Bible, and especially if they talk about manna, and our stuff has changed. Our water isn't even, if the people from the biblical times came here, and time traveled here and tasted our water, they'd be, they'd be shocked, because our rivers and everything are so gross now. So, God only knows what's changed, and if we used to have manna, and that was monoatomic gold, and that everybody used to eat, or the priests, or the Egyptians, or whatever, and all the stuff like that. I just can't even imagine, what kind, and especially, with the Egyptian pyramid, whether it used to be capped with gold, that one, the big one. Can't think of the name, sorry. But I can't even imagine all the properties of what the pyramid could hold and do when you get all that kind of, like you talked about the stone, the bell rocks, the frequency and everything. My gosh, having them set straight up and ringing, I can't even imagine what kind of magic that could really, really, truly create.
Well, this is the other thing that we are starting to realize is the power of the DNA in our bodies. What is DNA actually all about? And in Slave Species of the Gods, I write a long chapter on DNA and what we believe DNA to be. But it's gone even way beyond that now. What we thought we knew about DNA 10 years ago is completely and utterly overturned on its head. And DNA is clearly the essence. And this is what I find fascinating. When you read Zecharia Sitchin's work and the connections that I've made to it now are so critical and so important, I'm only starting to figure out its importance now, several years after I started writing these books. The fact that they refer to the DNA in the Sumerian tablets by Sitchin as the entwined essence, and how they talk about delicately unwinding the entwined essence so that they could add and remove aspects to it, so that they could create a creature that wasn't as smart as they were, but could understand their instructions and commands and could perform the tasks that they wanted the creature to perform. And this is, they refer to the DNA as entwined essence. Now, I believe that entwined essence is a much more descriptive term for DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. And this is how we in the so-called modernized world have just confused and messed everything up. We don't understand what DNA is, but we just give it a big fancy long word that confuses everybody.
Yeah, and they kind of actually did a lobotomy on the DNA, didn't they? They pretty much stirred, to break down some of the story describes, breaking down some of that to dumb us down and lobotomize our DNA, basically.
Yeah, but at the same time, it sounds like they had to engineer it so that we got a larger frontal lobe. It all depends what creatures they used to extract the DNA from. It seems like they used their own DNA to create the basis, the basis foundation for the DNA, and then they switched off several of the genes of their own DNA and then introduced some of the DNA of the creatures that were on planet Earth, possibly Homo erectus. It certainly seems like it, from even just the way we look, linked to certain species, certain progressive race groups that we might have had on this planet. I tell you, this whole thing with race is another important thing that people need to come to terms with, because if you have one source of DNA and one source of human, then there's absolutely no reason why you should have, different race groups suddenly emerging. Just ask yourself this question. Some people don't quite understand this when I bring it up. Ask yourself this question. In China, if all the people in China look Chinese, they look like they're Chinese, they have the same features, they have the same color hair, the same color eyes, and so forth. Okay, so the argument on different race groups and the fact that our DNA was messed with to create other race groups is as follows. If our DNA wasn't messed with, at which point does a Chinese couple suddenly give birth to a blue-eyed, blonde-haired person that looks Scandinavian? At which point does that happen?
Right, and plus different blood types.
Yeah.
Oh, my dog is barking, sorry.
Don't worry, my dogs will probably start going very soon.
But I'm Michael, I'm kind of curious, not to sound silly, but do you think some of this Bigfoot Sasquatch stuff are like beings that, or kind of like part of some of this creation or genetically, or some of these stories about the Sasquatch and stuff, it's like, do you think they were like some of the experiments of these beings and they're still around?
Oh, I absolutely no doubt that that's the case. Either remains of the experiments that as you say, that somehow survived, or just interbreeding. Because once you create different species, now you get them interbreeding. Now you've created a problem. If you've got one original species that they just carry on producing their own species. But then you introduce another species that can cross-pollinate the genetic pool, then you start creating problems. So yeah, the Bigfoot and so forth. Clearly, we've had giants and humans of all sizes on planet Earth. All ancient cultures talk about that. I just wrote into my new book that's about to be released by Bear & Co. as well. Temples of the African temples of the Anunnaki, which is a newer version of Temples of the African Gods. That's going to be released in March this coming year by Bear & Co. And I've just written about the whole thing about giants in human history. There is no ancient culture that does not have stories of giants in their time. Whether you look at the Bible, the Quran, you look at all ancient cultures, they all talk about the giants. And I don't know, have you seen that giant footprint that I put up on my YouTube clip, YouTube channel, the 4-foot giant footprint in rough granite here? It's about 2 hours away from my house. And,
yeah, I saw that.
That's one of the best examples of giants in history. And, what I find fascinating is that you still get people that are just so dumbed down and so conditioned and so controlled in their thinking that they just will not accept it. You'll shove it right in their face and they'll keep arguing against it. And in fact, that reminds me of Morpheus in the Matrix. When he talks about the Matrix and explains to Neo about the Matrix and that they're trapped within the Matrix, and the lawyers and the bankers and the people that work in the Matrix and go, wake up every day and spend their life in the Matrix, they are so caught up in the Matrix that they will actually defend it. Mm-hmm. They don't know that they're enslaved, completely and utterly controlled and enslaved beyond their wildest imagination. But they will defend and beat and kill those that attack the Matrix. And this is what I find. You can show people the evidence, shove it right in their face, and they will tell you that it's not there. It doesn't exist. It's just your imagination. It's quite spectacular.
So, Michael, when it comes to the Anunnaki and, the Lord from the Bible and Jesus, are they the same, or are that two different types of beings?
Well, of course, completely different beings. You can't compare Jesus to the Anunnaki. I think Christ consciousness is very directly linked to what is happening to our consciousness right now, rising and exploding. The Anunnaki, I've always believed that the Anunnaki and the Elohim in the Bible were the same individuals. And it's quite interesting that I was just recently given confirmation of that. Well, there are two sets of confirmation. First of all, I had a chat with George Nuri a few days ago on Coast to Coast, and right towards the end of my 3-hour session with him, a guy called in and said that about 12 years ago he was abducted. It wasn't an abduction that they, put him out and he had amnesia and memory loss. He was conscious and awake throughout the whole thing, and he was taken on board the ship by these tall, blonde, blue-eyed beings, and they told him they were known as the Anunnaki, but between themselves and the other name was Elohim. Now this was fascinating.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
and this chap, when he was abducted, he was completely unaware of what we're talking about here. He had not studied any of this. He had not read any Sitchin. He had never heard of Zechariah Sitchin or the Anunnaki, none of this. So when they told him all this information, he came back and carried on, slightly obviously shaken up, I guess, or intrigued by what happened to him. And then suddenly he discovered the works of Zechariah Sitchin and the Anunnaki and my work and so forth. And he called in and spilled the beans right at the end when time was running out. So I'm about to make Skype contact with him and have a long chat with him to get his whole story, because it basically is evidence from a completely unexpected source of the Anunnaki, their activity, but also the different types of Anunnaki, those that wanted this to happen on Earth and those that were opposed to it. So even within the Anunnaki, there seem to be factions that differ in opinion. What seems to have happened here was pretty much premeditated and planned, and the abuse got so out of control that I think at some stage there was conflict and a difference of opinion between the Anunnaki that started to cause the breakup and the rift within their gold mining operations and the control of humanity on this planet. That also doesn't preclude and exclude other ETs from arriving here, trying to assert themselves on this planet, and then the battles between the gods. The Hindu Mahabharata epic talks about the battles of the gods and the machines and the vimanas and the flying machines and the weapons of mass destruction, and this is very clearly spelled out in not just Hindu tradition, but many ancient cultures that talk about these. So, once again, it's not just the Anunnaki, but there seems to be other interference by other ETs, and this is where we start possibly seeing the gross and the giant, vast manipulation of our DNA structure, and not just through the Anunnaki manipulation to create the gold mining slaves, but other ETs that might have come here and created and cloned other beings on Earth that then created different race groups among the humans that were already present on this planet. Because the different race groups remains a huge, huge problem for me, and I just cannot reconcile it with anything other than genetic interference by other ETs that then made those beings look more like themselves than what they already looked on this planet.
Yeah, you know what, Michael, it just dawned on me that it's funny that, the people don't give your discoveries and your, what you talked about with Adam's calendar and everything else. It's all about the gold, and it's funny because there's a gold mine right there.
Yeah.
Somebody with the gold mine that owns it or whatever is probably saying, well, I'll give you a portion of this if you don't investigate it. I know that I don't usually do conspiracies, but come on, I mean, it's just funny that, it happens to be like, you have scientific evidence that there's rocks that have been dug and carved, you know what I mean? There's so much obvious. I mean, it slaps in your face. Like you said, you don't have to be a rocket scientist on your video or whatever you said to see the evidence, not even talk about scientifically testing it. And they're just ignoring it. I'm just really like, and then there's gold.
Yeah. Well, where Adam's calendar is? Adam's calendar is perched on the edge of a cliff, and Adam's calendar was built by Enki, the Sumerian Enki. So let's also quickly talk about that, because you got the two brothers, Enki and Enlil, right? So Enki was the guy that came to southern Africa, or what he called the Abzu, and there was a distinction between the Abzu and the Deep Abzu. So I believe when they refer to the Deep Abzu, they're actually referring to South Africa rather than Zimbabwe or possibly southern Zambia. But Deep Abzu would definitely be South Africa in my book, and the Abzu would then be South Africa and Zimbabwe, Botswana, and parts of Mozambique, so Enki came down here and he started setting up the gold mining empire, and that's where he built what I believe to be his home, which is the Great Zimbabwe Ruins, which is a great mystery to archaeologists and anthropologists. It just confuses the living daylights out of them. And that has got energetic footprints and imprints on it that clearly states that it was built and created by Enki as his headquarters here in the gold mining empire. But Adam's calendar is also a construct of Enki. It's got all the energetic codes encoded into it, and I can talk about that a little bit later as well if you want to know more about it, because otherwise one gets distracted all the time. And it's aligned with the Great Zimbabwe ruins, structures of Great Zimbabwe, and the Great Pyramid of Giza on the 31 East longitudinal line. Now, my good friend Willem de Swart, who's decoded all the numbers of the world and is doing incredible work in in decoding the tarot and the relationships and the ratios and the sacred geometry and what I call numeric science and the secret numbers of God, he makes it very clear that the number 31, because so Adam's calendar or Enki's calendar, Enki's house at Great Zimbabwe and the pyramid at Great Giza are all aligned along the 31 degrees east longitudinal line, which in ancient times was Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, that was it. That was a central line that ruled the world. And this is why these three major ancient structures are built on that longitudinal line. And 31, when you decode it, its numeric value translates into El or Elohim. So Enki built it, the Anunnaki built it, and the numeric value can be decoded to mean Elohim or El. You know that the Anunnaki and the Elohim are the same beings. And this is why I was convinced that they were the same beings. And when this guy called in to George Nuri the other day and said that they called themselves the Elohim, it all made sense to me. And now I have completely separate corroboration that my instincts were correct on that.
There's no coincidence, is there?
Yeah, and just to link Adam's calendar to the gold mining, it's really important that, remember, Enki's goal was to set up a gold mining empire, which he did. Adam's calendar looks down from the edge of the mountain, which is about 700 meters above the valley below, that looks out over the Barberton Valley, which is an ancient impact crater that's about 3 billion years old. It has the oldest rock in the world. It's there, and someplace in Australia that they always say is the oldest rock in the world that is exposed. It's 3.2 billion years old. And during that impact that would have exposed all this ancient rock, would have pushed all the minerals closer to the surface or somehow pushed it out. And that is why the richest gold mines in the world are still situated there today. And this is where the gold rush in South Africa in the mid-1800s happened in that valley. In Barberton was one of the first gold mining, gold rush towns. But, so at today, the gold mine that was opened in the mid-1500s is still situated there. And it's called Sheba Gold Mine. It's, as the Queen of Sheba, did they know something that we don't know today when they gave it that name? And it has the richest gold production, as far as I know. And the important thing that's linked to Adam's calendar is that it's located at a little town called Kaap se Hoop. And Kaap se Hoop is where they found the largest gold nugget in all of South African modern gold mining history. It was just over 5 kilograms. I mean, that's a huge gold nugget. Yeah. So for anyone that doubts that all this activity is linked to gold, believe me, it's all connected to gold. And I can tell you more about the gold mines that are scattered throughout Southern Africa that are connected to all this activity as well.
Yeah, how big would that, you said that's a big, huge piece of gold. How big is that? I'm trying to imagine the...
5. From what I understand, it was about the size of a man's fist.
Oh, man. I can imagine. That'd probably be nice to find it in your pan, your gold mining pan. Yeah,
yeah. And it was just lying, and it was found in this little stream on top of the mountain there. But that's just for people that doubt this or that have any doubt. This is all to do with gold, like I said earlier. All of human history and the activities here are linked to gold. Now, Adam's calendar is not new to ancient African knowledge keepers. This is, it was discovered by Jan Heine, as I said earlier, by accident in 2003. But if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be talking about it now, because he was wide awake and astute enough to know that it wasn't just a random collection of rocks, that it had some very specific structure to it. And he came back and over a 3-year or 4-year period started to measure it and analyzing it and realizing that it's connected to the solstices and equinoxes and so forth. But it's only when I got involved with him that we measured it and realized that it's offset by 3¼ degrees. So it was built in ancient times when the true north, south, east, and west is not where it is today. It means it was a crustal displacement that happened, as I mentioned. But we don't know when that crustal displacement happened. It must be very old for that to have happened. The erosion on some of the rocks at Adam's Calendar, the main rock, the erosion on a break on one of the rocks suggests that it's at least 50,000 years old. At least, probably a lot more. So now we started to get an idea of how old the calendar site is. But it is known by African shaman and keepers of ancient knowledge and wisdom as the place where humanity was created. And Credo Mutwa was the one that broke this information to me, and he was very clear in telling me when he burst into tears when I showed him the photographs of Adam's Calendar the first time I met him. When was that? That must have been in about 2009 when I met him for the first time.
I was just about to mention him, and you jerked it from my brain.
Sorry to steal your thunder there, Jeffrey. Well, it was actually very interesting because I was actually somewhere up the mountain, I think, in one of the ruins, and a friend of mine called me on my cell phone and said, "Hey, I'm sitting with Credo Mutwa. We're visiting Credo Mutwa, and your book, Slave Species of the Gods, was lying on his desk and on his table, coffee table, and it was so well paged. It looked like he'd been going through it over and over again." And so she said to Credo, "Oh, do you know Michael Tellinger?" And he said, "No, but I want to speak to Mr. Tellinger." He said, so she came outside and she phoned me and said, "Hey, Credo wants to speak to you." So that led to me going down to meet Credo Mutwa, and at that stage I'd just published Adam's Calendar, my second book, on the calendar site, and I took that down to him and I showed him the book, and he just burst into tears. And he said that he never thought he would see that sacred site again. He told me he was initiated there in 1937 as a young African shaman. And you know that he is now the highest shaman in South Africa or Africa. I'm not quite sure where, how far that seniority goes. But in South Africa, certainly, he's a Sanusi. It's the highest form of shamanism you can reach. He has so much knowledge that it is mind-blowing. You just cannot believe this man's knowledge. He's beyond a walking encyclopedia. He carries thousands and thousands of years of knowledge and information. And he passed a lot of that knowledge down to us in his incredible book called Indaba, My Children, for which he got into trouble because some people thought that he shouldn't have shared that shamanic knowledge with the rest of the world. But I believe at that stage he felt that his life was just sliding sideways, and he wanted to share the knowledge and put it out there in case something happened to him. Well, when he told me that he was initiated at Adam's Calendar in 1937 as a young shaman, I think he was 16 years old at that stage. I think he's about 92 now or something like that. I'm not sure how the numbers add up there, so don't hold me to it. And he also told me that it's known as Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods, and specifically the African name for the Sumerian deity Enki. And he also told me that Enki is known as Enkai, the creator of the human race. And you start linking all these things together, and, you know, anyone that still doubts it or argues against it is, you know, clearly completely and utterly brainwashed by the modern education system and needs to start taking some serious drugs to get out of that state of mind.
Does it take the red pill or the blue pill? I forgot which one from the movie Matrix.
Take both.
Oh, yeah. What would happen if they took both? Somebody else pulls out, Neo pulls out the green pill. You know, this is one special.
Yeah, take the green pill and the red pill, or the blue pill and the red pill, and then you'll be able to live in the physical world, and you'll be able to transmutate into the other dimensions.
Well, I don't really understand why people have such a big problem with it. If you look at our society, it's based on the model of what you're presenting here. There's selfishness with gold. There's psychos trying to enslave people. if we're made in the image of these beings on some level, then it's perfectly obvious that it's connected in the origin story on some level. So I don't really understand why so many people have trouble with it when our civilization, I mean, it's based on selfishness and greed and money, which is what exactly, you know, the whole story is about. These beings coming to get gold for their own selfish reasons at the expense of slaves. And if you look at slavery throughout humanity, slavery's still going on to this day, from the sex trade to God knows what, to psychos stealing little girls and keeping them in their basements. I mean, so it makes sense, as is above, so is below. So, I mean, I don't doubt it. I question it some, but I mean, I think there's definitely, you know, the parallels there on many levels.
Well, you know, the slavery thing is important because you cannot separate human history. There are three things that I always tell people. You can't separate human history and human origins from the obsession with gold. Slavery, I mean, you know, in the book of Genesis, God explains, and Exodus, God explains about slaves and how you should treat your slaves and how many beatings, how badly you can beat your slave and under which conditions you can even kill your slave. I mean, it's insane that God would be telling, you know, the slave masters that they could kill their slaves. So clearly we're not dealing with the God with a big G, as I call it, or the divine creator of all things in the universe, or the divine source of all things, whatever you want to call that God or that creator, and the gods with the small g, the Elohim, the Anunnaki. Remember that Elohim is a plural. You know, some people are still not aware of that, so let me remind them. Elohim is a plural, the gods. It never was a singular. It was very conveniently changed to God because they realized that Elohim would, the gods would not, you know, go down well, and they needed to create control. So, yeah, so as you say, it's very clear that this has been going on, and the gold is the common denominator, slavery is the other one, and then the flying serpent or the winged serpent is another one that all ancient cultures have. That's a very interesting thing, the serpent worship thing, and it's encoded in the ancient symbols of the caduceus, which also seems to be linked to Enki as a symbol of the creator God, and some of his offspring, and the key thing here is, what do we do with this knowledge and information? Because you've just now gone and done exactly what I've been doing in my presentations. Linked what we learned from these discoveries, Adam's calendar, this vanished civilization, more than 10 million stone structures, all linked to hundreds of thousands of gold mines. Now, we haven't spoken about that yet. There's evidence of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of gold mines in southern Africa. Some of them have been closed up. Some of them are still open, and there's also evidence in the modern gold mining offices of ancient gold mines that they discovered and covered up with remains, human remains. We don't know what human remains they were, but there were ancient gold mines that were discovered, and the instructions are, when you discover such gold mines, close them up, cover it up. They don't want that evidence to come out. They've got their own selfish reasons why they won't close it up. Because there's this whole thing of you know, if they find an ancient archaeological site, they won't be able to mine the gold. So if they come across something like that, then the instructions are, close up the shaft and go and dig a shaft somewhere nearby so that they don't stop us from mining the gold or the platinum or whatever it is they're mining. And our entire planet is just one giant mining colony. People, this is what you need to get in your head. We are as enslaved as we were 280,000 years ago when we were first cloned as gold mining slaves with low knowledge, low consciousness, no ability to speak. There were probably only males or asexual beings cloned at that stage. The first humans cloned only had 22 chromosomes. This has been confirmed by some of the world's leading geneticists, and this is what I've been suggesting for a long time, and my theories were confirmed very recently, that the first humans cloned only had 22 pairs of chromosomes, and the 23rd chromosome was added as a sex chromosome, the X and Y chromosomes, when Eve was fashioned from Adam's rib, so that they could procreate, because they needed more slaves, so they needed them to procreate on their own, and create babies so that they could put the babies to work in the mines, because that way they would get more slaves. They were cloning them in these cloning chambers that are discovered here in South Africa as well. These weird hexagonal shaped structures, there were these cloning chambers. This was confirmed by various sources as well. And the fact that they're these hexagonal cloning chambers, they look like honeycombs, which instantly raise, huge questions and confusion. Why would anybody build these kind of structures, only to figure out that these were actually the very early cloning chambers? And they cloned these humans from 0 to adulthood in 9 months, the same time it takes for a woman to bear a child, to carry a child. From fetus to adult human that would come out of that amniotic sac, be taught how to walk, be taught how to listen and understand, take instructions, and then within a few weeks, I guess, or so, be sent into work in the mines. This is horrific stuff.
Yeah, maybe if they ate some monoatomic gold, they'd do that. Because that just I could see that happening. What would if we all ate it? What would happen to us? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, look, they use sound frequencies. They use all, and that's the other important thing. The common denominator as a source of energy and activating device is sound. And and I'm not saying that because I've got a warm, fuzzy feeling in my stomach about it. I've measured it with some of the most sophisticated electronic equipment that you can get. And we've measured sound frequencies and electromagnetic waves and heat signatures and the loudness of these sound frequencies that are just off the scale. We have not measured anything like this on planet Earth today, other than in these stone structures that have been left behind. And I must also explain that majority of these more than 10 million stone ruins, these circular stone structures, have been covered by soil. They're gone. You can see them on Google shots if you know what you're looking for. On aerial photographs, you can still see them, but most of them are covered by soil, which suggests that at some stage in the recent times, something happened that covered them by soil. What was that event that covered them by soil? Well, I believe that was the so-called Great Biblical Flood that destroyed the whole world. And it was at that time, there's very little argument in the geological and archaeological circles that there was this great flood event between 12 and 13,000 years ago. I think that's pretty well documented now geologically and sedimentary discoveries and so forth that tell us there was this huge global event that pretty much destroyed most of this planet. If it is true, according to Zachariah Sitchin, that this flood emanated from Antarctica, from the southern pole, and moved northwards in giant tidal waves. I'm talking giant tidal waves, not little tsunamis. I'm talking, that are, 10 meters, 20 meters high. I'm talking tidal waves that are between 2 and 5 kilometers high. Nothing will stand in its way. It'll go over the Himalayas. And pretty much like the scenes that we saw in the movie 2012. That was really well done.
Yeah.
So imagine if it did come from the south, from Antarctica, moving northwards as a giant tidal wave. This giant, vast gold mining operation that was set up here in Southern Africa, would have been completely destroyed. It would have been one of the first things, it would have been the first thing that tidal wave would have hit. That's it, the first obstacle in its way. So I believe that this gold mining empire was destroyed by the flood some 12,000 years ago, and that then becomes the major dividing line in human history. What happened pre the Diluvian period, the antediluvian period, and the post-Diluvian period after the flood. And it's only after the flood that most of our history books and oral traditions go back to. And that's after the flood we start seeing the rapid advancement of civilization, so-called civilization, modernization. You start seeing the developments of towns and cities and villages, and the total enslavement of the human race. It's at that point that you suddenly see the appearance of this magical thing called money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is why I believe it's important to link all of this ancient knowledge to the sudden mysterious appearance of money and the control of money inserting it into the human race as a tool of enslavement. By who? By the priest kings, who had the rights. They had all the rights and the knowledge, and they were told how to do this. By the gods. Because remember, the Sumerian tablets keep telling us that the kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven when priest kings were appointed by the gods to rule over humanity. It's very clearly spelled out for us. So once you've got enough of the pieces of this puzzle, the rest of the pieces start flowing in a lot quicker, and it starts to make a lot more sense a lot quicker, and it's easier to comprehend this murky pond of human history.
You know, it's funny. I just got... Jeff, did you need to say anything? Because I'm on a roll here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because I imagine the workers in the mine, and, you know, after a while, just I think humans in general, just, you know, if they're, hey man, I'm working my butt off, and they get all this, you know, shiny stuff or whatever. I want some, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like the kings or the whatever, slave masters or whatever they call it, you know, that's running it. They say, oh, here, you can have this, you know, here's a shiny object. Oh, in other words, it turns into the barter system with money because, well, we gotta trick those dumb humans into thinking that this is a special object, you know. And now look what we have. We have like pieces of paper, and not even that. We have plastic that's in a computer thing that we never really see. We never really see the money, like you said. It's kind of weird.
Well, the thing of slavery is a fascinating one. We are all slaves. We are each, you, me, Jeffrey. We are all enslaved, whether we like it or not, because we still live in this world that is completely and utterly controlled by money. You can't do anything without money. If you try, you will not succeed. It's as simple as that. I know that there's some people that have said they've been living without money for 10 years or 12 years or whatever. But those are people that have done this consciously. They've set themselves up so they live on this little farm or a small holding or wherever, and they somehow manage to live without money. That's a different thing. But if you live in a city or in a built-up area, it's not going to be possible for you to do this under the current conditions. If you don't have money, very, very soon are you going to be labeled a criminal because you're going to do something that is not acceptable according to the current, norms and conditions that are imposed on us by the authorities. Who are the authorities? The authorities are supposed to be our servants, right? We appoint them to be our servants to do for us what we need. And that has completely been twisted. But in ancient times, the sudden mysterious appearance of money, and this is where all historians get it wrong, I'm afraid. They just assume, I don't know why they assume this, they assume that money evolved out of a barter and trade situation, like you suggested. That is not the case. Money was created and introduced into the humanity by the priest kings in ancient times. The earliest forms of money we find come from the Sumerian period in the form of clay tablets. And these little clay tablets were like tokens for exchange. So they were really, in essence, the first forms of money. And who was capable of issuing clay tablets in those early times, 4000 BC, or maybe even earlier? The only people capable of issuing those tokens, clay tablets, were those with the knowledge of the legal system, who controlled the legal system, and who controlled those very early courts and had the rights to write and create clay tablets, and those were the priest kings. So they issued these clay tablets as forms and tokens of payment and receiving and exchanging goods, and that then became minted and coined money later, with always the king's, king's head or the crown's seal on it. It always belonged to the god, to the kings. Now remember, when the thugs from Europe in the late 1400s started invading the Americas and South Africa, Southern Africa, and the rest of Asia, it all happened more or less at the same time, right? In, 1470 that the Spaniards arrived in the Americas. It was also in 1470s that the Portuguese arrived in Southern Africa and then went on to India, and they were then followed by the Dutch and the English. And when they invaded these native populations and these new continents, and they came across the native people with their vast amounts of gold, they were always amazed that these native people had these vast amounts of gold stashed away. And when they asked these native people, who does the gold belong to, they always were met by one answer. The gold belongs to the gods. It doesn't belong to us.
Yeah.
So when they started hoarding the gold from the Americas across the Atlantic to Europe, that was spectacular. They just looted. They took all the gold that belonged to the gods. And this is very important. And people don't often get reminded of that. So the obsession with human gold doesn't come from humanity. It comes from the gods. And the Bible is a very good example of that, actually. Because in Genesis 2, this is the earliest, you've just started reading the Bible. You finished Genesis 1, and you read Genesis 2, the second chapter in Genesis, and God, or the Elohim, the gods, come to Adam and say to him, explain to Adam about this place called Havilah, where the land is good, the water is good, and by the way, buddy, there is gold. It's the gods that mention gold for the first time to Adam. The interesting thing is that at that stage, Adam was alone on earth. Eve had not yet been fashioned from his rib. So this is consistent with my earlier research in the Anunnaki and the earlier settlements here and cloning humans as slaves in the gold mines, when only males were cloned for the gold mining. They had no one to copulate with and produce offspring, right? So that's consistent. So the Genesis 2 in the Bible is consistent with that, because Adam is alone. Eve doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
And,
sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
It's funny you mentioned that, too, because think about it. It's like, well, there's still traditions, or there was from, Roman days and all that, that I hear about, where basically it's horrible, and this is horrible, but pretty much committing infanticide if it's a female, but yet keeping the male for, like, the warrior and the working, properties, if you know what I mean, that kind of keep the cost maybe of the food or whatever going down in a society. And then they think about the gold mining, and it probably kind of, maybe, I don't know if they did that back then, but you know what I mean? There could be some link there with, like, well, men are, you know what I mean, more worthy or more, you know what I mean, because they can do the more physical, labor in the gold mine.
I'm not sure why that is. It's an interesting thought, maybe just more muscular and slightly bigger. But then obviously they needed to have them, multiply quicker. As I said earlier, they just weren't cloning them fast enough, and that's why they needed them to procreate on their own. And go ahead.
Sorry, Michael. I'm so excited to talk to you. I love this.
Go ahead, Erica.
I gotta get this in. Do you think that the trees, when I was watching the trees and you talked about the Adam's calendar trees that seem to be sprung up like out of nowhere, that burial altar or something that might be Dumuzi's altar, Enki's son. I was just thinking, and you mentioned, how did they, it's almost like it springs up because of the minerals and the thing. Do you think there's a chance that they could have almost planted, like sometimes you go and you plant, like, so someone passes away and then you plant a tree and then it gets bigger? Do you think there was anything to do with deliberately planting trees so that they would become some of the landscape to show the ritual, path?
I don't think so. Not particularly at this site, because where Adam's calendar is and Dumuzi's grave, or the stone altar as we first called it, which is about 700 meters north of Adam's calendar, exactly in line with the, that 31 degrees east longitudinal line as well. That's all grassland. There's no trees. There should be no trees growing there. It's very much grassland. And I believe the trees there are just opportunistic growth from birds, because they put stones there, and then the birds come and sit on the stones, and they poo on the stone, and then the rain washes it off, and the seeds land next to the rock, and it's protected there, and it's sheltered, so it grows next to the rock. So you'll find the trees and the plants like to grow along the sides of the rocks and the stones that were used for the building of the calendar site. I believe just from the birds. It's opportunistic growth. It wasn't there originally.
Okay.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So, Michael, when it comes to our animalistic slave side, or the DNA that's been suppressed by them when we were made into slaves, or the slaves were made into slaves, and they took that part away from us, what are some ways to regain that back and to tap back into that, to open that up? And also, like a second part of this question, I've heard stories that these beings who have suppressed their DNA for their own selfish purposes karmically are paying for it now and having to come back to assist us to overcome it. What do you think about that?
Definitely. There's definitely a split in the Anunnaki faction. There's sometimes referred to as the remnants, and then the elders, and that's what this chap that came onto Coast to Coast said, that they told him as well when he was abducted on the ship. They told him that they are the original Anunnaki, and he described them very clearly the way that Sitchin describes them in his books. Tall, blue-eyed, blonde hair, light-skinned, very same descriptions, sort of Aryan kind of looking, and I guess that's where the Aryan race would come from. So it's quite obvious where that genetic strand comes from. Well, it seems obvious where it comes from. And they describe that they're not the ones that created the mess on Earth. They're the ones that come from the original planet, that stay on the planet. Now, the other important thing is that, excuse me, I suspected for a long time that their so-called planet Nibiru is not as simple as we think it is, and that there's more to it than we think. I did a past life regression, probably just more than a year ago now, and I had some very interesting revelations in my first ever past life regression. And one of the things that I was shown was that Nibiru actually has two planets. It's like binary planets, if you can call them that. And it's not just one planet. And Nibiru is actually used as a decoy for the other planet by the Anunnaki. And strangely enough, that's exactly what this guy said on Coast to Coast. And it was like shivers down my spine. Wow, that's exactly what I had in my past life regression. And they didn't use the white powder of gold or the monoatomic gold. They didn't use that to protect their planet, like Sitchin suggests in his translations. And this is really important. Sometimes you've got to understand that when Sitchin wrote the stuff, it was his interpretation of the translations. And a lot of channeled information as well, I believe. But a lot of the translations, they were actually physical translations of the written clay tablets, were his interpretations of the meanings, not understanding DNA and genetics fully and understanding some of the things. So he would interpret it in a specific way. Had he known what we know today and known about these ancient sites and more information, he probably would have made slightly different interpretations. So you can't say he was wrong in some occasions. It was just his interpretation from what he understood at the time. And what he says is that they took the gold and they ground it to the finest powder, and then they suspended it in the atmosphere to protect them against, cosmic rays and the negative rays and frequencies from space. Well, he's correct and wrong at the same time, because first of all, you can take nanoparticles of gold and you can blend them with DNA. We can create synthetic DNA. And we can put nano gold, blend it with DNA that creates like a cybergenetic organism. So it's a living organism that has got nanoparticles of gold that make it up. It's like science fiction comes to life. It's amazing. And you can suspend that. It's so light, you can suspend it in the atmosphere. And this fabric that you create, this material of DNA with gold in it, you can't destroy it. If you tear it or you cut it or break it, it automatically closes itself and grows and fixes itself because it's living. It's a living organism. It's spectacular. It's like
just like chemtrails.
Yeah. So that's what Sitchin suggested. I believe that when he talks about actually taking the gold and grinding it to the finest powder, that was a misinterpretation. What he actually didn't understand at that stage was the white powder of gold aspect, the monoatomic gold. I believe that they were converting it to a fine powder, not grinding it to a fine powder, right? It's just a change in word. Grinding it, converting it to a fine powder, turning gold into white powder of gold. And that becomes a completely different substance. It is devoid of gravity, as you know. It has healing properties. It has other properties that we probably don't even know about. It's a superconductor. It does all these amazing things in terms of our physicality. But in my past life regression, I was told that they used the white powder of gold not to protect their planet against cosmic rays, but to shield the planet energetically so that their actions and their thoughts would not be picked up by other beings of higher consciousness, so that they wouldn't be stopped and interfered with while they were colonizing planet Earth and other planets and doing what they were doing here, which went against the universal code of non-interference or the prime directive. These are a strange sequence of events, you know. So the planet was hidden and concealed by this cloud or an energy field of white powder of gold, monoatomic gold, which has got very strong energetic properties, which allowed them then to do what they did on this planet. Now, when we started talking, I think Jeffrey asked the question against, you know, did they go against the prime directive or some sort of universal code? Absolutely. Yeah. And there's another beautiful, Jeffrey, this will blow your mind. I was doing a presentation in Minneapolis, and after the presentation, I had a guy, and I can't remember his name now. I've got his card here somewhere. I must look it up and make contact with him, because he came to me afterwards and he said, look, he works for MUFON. He's a senior investigator for MUFON. Been working with them for 20 years. And the last several years, he's been working with an elderly couple on a farm near Minneapolis. And they have a number of ETs that live on their farm. And this is quite interesting. This elderly couple is quite conservative. They don't really know much about this stuff, but they're okay with ETs living on their farm. And the MUFON chap told me that they've got incredible footage of recordings and video footage of all kinds of ETs, big, tall ones and smaller ones, and craft coming in and manifesting and just disappearing and flying in and hovering, and ETs coming in and out, and all kinds of footage that is just absolutely mind-blowing. But the ETs have told them to hold on to that until they tell them to release it. So they're honoring that instruction. But the fascinating thing that happened is that the last time he was there, he asked the farmer, ask them when you speak to them again or when you see them, ask them about the Anunnaki, if they know anything about the Anunnaki. So the farmer had to write that name down because he'd never heard the word Anunnaki. And the MUFON guy wasn't even 10 minutes away in his car when the farmer phoned him. And the ETs communicate telepathically with him. He doesn't talk to them. They just, tell him things telepathically. And he was completely baffled by this, the farmer. He said, look, I don't understand what this means, but maybe you'll make more sense of it than I do. This is what they told me. They said that the Anunnaki created a great sin against all of humanity by what they did on planet Earth. Created a great sin against all of creation. And for what they did on Earth have been cast out of the book of life by the beings of higher consciousness. And what I believe he was referring to there is what they did here through creating the karmic trap, where, and this has been a huge, obviously, subject of debate by, people in spiritual circles and so forth, this whole thing called karma and the karmic trap, which has now emerged, and I have absolutely no doubt that this is a construct of the Anunnaki. It's an energetic construct. It's just, beings that understand the laws of nature and the flow of energy and the abuse, how to abuse that, using sacred geometry and levels and layers upon energetic construct and so forth, where they created these energetic fields around planet Earth so that when souls enter human bodies, they forget. Once they get beyond that, it's like a black hole for souls. And they forget, the souls forget where they come from. Because the concept of karma is the most nonsensical thought that anyone could have. So people that believe that karma is a natural order of things, that you come back over and over again while you're learning your lesson, that is not the natural order of things. That is a enforced, what I refer to as the karmic trap. And it was created by the Anunnaki, or it seems to have been created by the Anunnaki, so that they can abuse the humans in their physical form. Because what they didn't expect was that when they cloned these humans, that souls would enter their body and would actually give them consciousness, higher levels of consciousness. They didn't expect this. They thought they were just creating these machines. But then what happened is that souls started entering these new slave species, and these beings started becoming very conscious very quickly. So they had to do something to stop that, and that's why they created the karmic trap, so that the souls would forget who they were, that they came from the divine unified source field of all things, and they were just a fractal aspect of the divine creative force. And this is why anyone that suggests that karma is a natural order of things hasn't thought this thing through, because there can be nothing more insane to suggest that the divine creative source of all things that manifests itself in an infinite number of fractals to have these insane experiences, if you want to call it that those fractals, which carry the same knowledge and information and code as the whole, would forget what it is, where it comes from, and why it's out there. Okay, do you understand what I'm talking about? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the fractals of the source would know exactly who they are, where they come from, and they make a conscious choice to inhabit a certain body in a physical form to have that experience. And so when that fractal soul then forgets who it is and what it is doing there, is the most nonsensical thought or idea that the divine creative source of all things has forgotten what it is and who it is. And this is, I believe, where the great masters and teachers like Christ and the others have come to teach us, to help us reawaken and help us activate our DNA through our minds and our thoughts, because we are inside, in essence, we are one with God. And remember, one of those big messages that Christ taught us is that God is within you. Well, what he was saying when he said God is within you, you're one with God. Exactly that your soul is God. You are actually God, the creator of all things in the universe. But you've forgotten this.
Yeah.
And this is what the Anunnaki did. And this was spectacular information that came to the farmer from other ETs that live on his farm. That when they said the Anunnaki created a great sin against all of creation, and for what they did on earth, they've been cast out of the book of life. Now those are strong words coming from other, I guess, higher beings of higher knowledge.
Yes. That's something else.
What can we do now, Michael? What can we do to, like you said earlier, I mean, is our DNA going to reactivate? Is it going to reroute? Are we going to be able to get control back in any way, or more control than we ever had? Is there any advice?
I believe, Erica, that's actually happening right now. As we speak, every millisecond of the day, our DNA is being activated. We are in a time of great change. As you know, we are in 2012, and some people still think that this is some weird, nonsensical thing. Well, let me tell you, I feel the energy is more on a daily basis. I don't know what you're experiencing right now, but my girlfriend Louise and I, we feel this on a daily basis. It is so strong. Sometimes it feels like I've stuck my fingers into an electric plug. My whole body is just vibrating. We are exposed to higher energy fields now than we have been in the last 26,000 years. Remember, we're completing the one great year as the Vedas talk about, the 26,000 year cycle, and so we're about to cross that galactic plane, and we're exposed to frequencies that we haven't felt for thousands of years. And see, now my dogs are going.
Well, hey, Erica and Michael, we're down to like 2 minutes, so it's been a great show, and I do believe we're going through a shift right now, and I definitely feel like it's happening, because there's some days I feel like I'm going freaking nuts, and then there's other days where I feel like I'm tapped into it. So I think everybody's going through it, and you just gotta stay positive and keep on trucking. But I guess, Michael, I want to thank you for doing the show. I want to thank Erica, but Michael, I want to get your links before you depart, most assuredly.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Thanks very much, Jeffrey and Erica. Lovely chatting to you. My websites are michaeltellinger.com, and then the Ubuntu Liberation Movement is the ubuntuparty.org.za, ubuntuparty.org.za. That's UBUNTU, Ubuntu. And join us and help us stay alive and keep the message of hope into a new age going strong. It's a global message.
Definitely, and check out Slave Species of the Gods, The Secret History of the Anunnaki and Their Mission on Earth. And Michael, will definitely have to get you back on when your other book comes out. I believe he said in March. Philip Coppens is going to be on, too, in March. So I'll have to get a hold of you, too, for another appearance. It's been a pleasure. And
thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to talk.
Definitely, and we'll talk again, and everybody, thanks for listening. Make sure you stop by churchofmabusradio.com and mingle, show some support. That's churchofmabusradio.com, and thank you for listening to UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Everybody have a good Sunday, and stay out of trouble, and prepare yourself for the American political process of the apocalypse that's about to occur. Take care, everybody. Keep safe. Good night.
Are we off the air?
Yeah, I am. I'm about to die.
Is Michael still on? He hung up?
I think so.
You check.
But good,
he's
good show.
Done.
Check this out. Get high yield checking at Capital One Bank. Instead of earning bupkis, your checking could be earning 5 times.
Let's see. Okay, you ready? We are live. Go ahead.
Joe, I'd like to discuss with you and sometimes I'll wake up at like 1:11. So I know this just from talking